go ahead and get started with what we have. What I'm going to do first is I put the PowerPoint that I'm going to be using today in the chat. So this is a PowerPoint that was done by Ray, so that way you guys have access to this. The PowerPoint that I'm showing is a little bit shorter because I try to cut out some pieces, but this is the full PowerPoint that was shared at the summit that the Rays did in June. So that should be in the chat. So I won't go in exactly this order that it's listed in. And so in June, Quenna and we were supposed to be on a plane to Philadelphia to attend this summit. We made it all the way to Texas before we got turned around because our flight got canceled. So we had to join virtually, which was very disappointing. We really wanted to be there live, but we did get this information. So Josie and Lauren from Rays, and then Zach McCall from Impact Parent Center in Missouri worked together and collaboratively to do this transition survey. I'm going to share my screen. And so what really I wanted to do today is just kind of go through this survey. It's 46 slides. We're not going to sit here and skim and go through 46 slides, but really what I want to do is kind of share the information that we saw and just really kind of get an idea of what do you think about the results from this? Do you think that this is true to the transition work that we're doing? Do you think this is the need of the youth that we're serving? And if not, where do we go from here? How do we use this data? How do we use it? Do you agree or disagree with what's being served, what's being shown here? Let me get on my screen. So the purpose of this survey was to inform the PTIs and related TA providers about the most impactful high school transition supports for positive post-school outcomes and life satisfaction among young adults with disabilities. I also want to say, if you have something to say, please interrupt me. This is not just meant for me to be talking for the next hour about this. So if there's questions you have, please feel free to interject and ask questions. So these are the 4 kind of top research questions that were asked. What are the current realities in terms of work, education, and level of satisfaction among young adults with disabilities aged 18 to 26? What transition activities, their content learned, experiences had, supports provided to young adults with disabilities have in school? To what extent do young adults with disabilities and parents of young adults with disabilities differ in their perceptions of high school transition activities and post-school outcomes and satisfaction ratings? And what high school transition activities have the strongest relationship to post-school outcomes and adult satisfaction ratings for young adults with disabilities aged 18 to 26? So again, this was done by Rays and Impact. They did an online survey through SurveyMonkey, and their main source of recruitment was through the Exceptional Parent magazine. And so that's a nationwide magazine. I think they said they even got some international responses when they did this survey. In total, 621 youth participated in this survey and 152 parents. So I thought that was, even though that's still a small number when you think about all the youth within the United States, I think it's still a good batch of youth to kind of get some information. So this is kind of what they did. This is their satisfaction rating on a 1 to 10. They asked them about how satisfied they were all overall in life with their work and education, social life, and living situation. And then they asked some questions about their paid job, education, and the combination of both, and yes or no questions. And then similar to what transition reports, what did they learn? What did they experience? And who supported them throughout that process? I decided to start with the end. Here are the results. So from the results, what they said was the most impactful transition activities were paid work experience, unpaid work experience, college experience, leadership and self-advocacy experience, volunteer experience, and internship experience. Now notice the word at the end is experience. So they're saying experience was the most impactful in any of their transition activities. It was the experience. The least impactful transition activities were the content that they learned, how to apply for a job, how to keep a job, strengths and weaknesses as a learner, legal rights as a person with a disability, how to make friends, how to live on their own, how to take care of their health needs, how to make life decisions for themselves, how to advocate for what they need. And then again, the experience they didn't have any least impactful situations, and then supports provided. These are what they said were the least helpful in their transition journey. So special education teachers, vocational rehabilitation, healthcare, transition coordination, their IEP team, school counselor, friends, family, youth organizations or groups. So I'm going to stop there and I see and just kind of like, what are your thoughts as you see this? What's going through your mind? Yeah, go ahead, Gloria.
Wow, so a lot, right? Yeah, I mean, I'm listening because I'm task, right? And as an agency, we do not specifically work with teens or youth on anything, right? We work with parents mainly, and then yes, we do try to get the youth in the fold, with any kind of advice or guidance we're providing with regard to their education. So that being said, however, it's my life because I have a 23-year-old with disabilities, and then looking at this, it's glaring to me. Like, my question is really the parents' role in this, because if I'm all over, right? I'm on the state commission for special ed. I'm the project, whatever region, whatever for task. And I'm a mom and I'm very involved. But it's like, I see a lot of people doing amazing things and collecting amazing data. But if the culture in the home is such that there's like fear or resistance to allowing your adult child to experience life and go out and have these experiences, which they said clearly was the best thing for them, it's tough. Yeah. Because I know in my home, yeah, there's times where I wanted to be like, you don't really want to go do that, do you? And then he'll be like, yeah, no. Or, hey, why don't we give this a try and see, if you liked it or not. So it's really easy to have a kid be angry at a situation and say these things. It's also very easy to have a family that isn't getting necessarily the services or the results or their fear addressed in these areas. So, I mean, I'm just kind of, it could mean a lot.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? What kind of initial thoughts? The results?
Did we ask the question in the reverse, like the most impactful people in their transition? Did we get that answered?
I think there's some in there of who was most helpful, but I think it changes depending on what they were looking for. So if it was a work experience, it might have been something different than educational, then kind of, so they're the different levels that they rated on. I think different supports were there. So we'll get to that. I wanted to start with the end because I was like, that's what we want, right? We want to hear what the results are. But something else that I wanted to be mindful of too is that, one, it is still a small sample size of youth. And some of the things that we don't have information on that I think would be important is we don't have demographic data here. We don't know the range or the types of disability that the youth who responded to these surveys have. We don't necessarily know where, so while this was a nationwide survey, they didn't have the pinpoint of location of where the youth were coming from. So it's just like, there's so much that we don't know. And so when we initially talked to Zach about this survey, he was like, this is just the very beginning kind of part of this. So that's why I'm like, what do we want to take from this? What do we do? And then, as you said, Gloria, as a parent center whose main job is to serve parents, how do we get these experiences, or how do we help parents get these experiences, or how do we help support the schools to get these experiences? Because that's not necessarily the role of a parent center, is to provide experiences to those youth, right?
Except, isn't it in our PTI grants this year that we provided to youth? So it may historically not be our forte. It is our challenge du jour, I think. And I am really impressed at the content learned. I'm impressed that the teens had that much awareness. Like, I'm a parent of a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old. And if my kids came up with all that, I'd be thrilled. Like, that is awesome. And I would agree that all the content that they're suggesting are things that they need to know. They're right. They are all things to know. I think it's really impressive. I'm impressed with those 600 plus teens. And I think 600 is a big survey response.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you're right. The youth work is becoming more important. And for this project specifically, we are really focused on bringing that youth voice to the project. So we did a focus group, and we have kind of a little infographic that we created that will share kind of the results that we had from those focus groups that we did. And then we just created our youth advisory community. So we're really trying to make sure that the youth voice is in this project and that they're guiding kind of the work and the resources that are being put out so that it's reflective of what they're needing versus what we're telling them they need. So here's the current reality. So when they asked them on the scale of 1 to 10 of these different areas of satisfaction, they rated 6, kind of 6.5, close to those, which I was very impressed with. I didn't think that it would be that high with their life satisfaction and job and social life. So I thought that was pretty interesting. These are asked about what experiences they've had since high school. So 73% of the participants said they've had paid jobs. 66 said they were did education, and then 85% said they had a combination of jobs and education. What high school transition supports did the participants have? So this is a long list. So this is what they learned in high school. So legal rights, applying for scholarships, student loans, jobs, career interest, and you'll see on the side that of the 621 youth, that only 32% of these had that in school. So that's like 198 youth out of the 600 that said, we actually learned this when we were in school. So strengths and weaknesses, how to keep a job, how to make friends. And then you see at the bottom is the self kind of life decisions and advocacy, like at the bottom that they're not 10%, 17% are actually learning this in school. So in that sense, I'm like, how do we as parent centers help bridge that gap and teaching the advocacy, self-determination? And then do youth find that to be helpful as they're going into adulthood? Any thoughts, questions here?
I only just had a thought as a parent that just because they say they didn't learn about it doesn't mean they weren't given the content. Because I mean, especially like what happens at age 18, that's required as part of their IEP, or at least what their IEP rights are. So I think it would come up, but I definitely know that my kids would say they didn't learn something that was taught. So
Yeah. And then these are the experiences that they've had in high school. So 39% said they volunteered, 27% internship. So then again, unpaid work, leadership, paid work, college, work training programs. So which of these helped you get ready for life as an adult? So this was interesting. And I think when we were in the summit, all parent centers were like, healthcare providers made the top of the list. So, and that was what helped them be ready for life as an adult, with the healthcare providers. But I think also with the mental health too, included like therapists, occupational therapy, physical therapists as well. Vocational rehabilitation, which is at the top, which in some other data, you'll see that vocational rehabilitation is actually towards the bottom in some of the things that they said were helpful. So it was this part of the data is confusing because like you rank it high and then in other places you rank it really low. But pre-ETS, family, Center for Independent Living, that one comes up a lot that they found beneficial was getting supports from the Centers for Independent Living. School counselors, other teachers, transition coordinators, the IEP team, youth organization and group. So I asked Zach where parent centers fall. I was like, why is there not a specific question about parent centers? When I asked him, he said that parent centers would fall under youth organization or group. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that because that's, again, historically not what parent centers are for, but it was weird to me that this is a survey that was done by a PTI center and raised, and no one specifically asked about how PTIs ranked on this list. So that's where he told us we fit, but I don't know that I necessarily agree with that statement. So I don't know where we fit and where PTIs fit on that. And again, with Maria saying the historical data being like parents helping parents, like even if youth were getting support from parents that were getting support from parent centers, they wouldn't identify as being helped from parent centers. It'd be more family support than it would be from PTI. So maybe we fall into the family category as well. I don't know. So average number of each type of transition activity. So if they're in school, yeah, they learned at, 2 to 3 times, provided supports and experiences had. So this is how the parents rate it differently. So in life satisfaction and living situation, the parents rated higher than the youth did in satisfaction levels. So those were two significantly different situations. And then
Were
in
they rating their own life satisfaction or the perceived life satisfaction of their child?
the perceived life satisfaction of their child. Yeah. And then here are a few more differences. So they actually rated lower than the young adults did in these areas.
Sherelle, you may have said this because I came in late. What was the age range for the people that
It was 18 to 26.
18 to 26?
Which transition supports were most associated with greater satisfaction? Again, this is the scale. And then overall satisfaction. So this is positive. So this is kind of where I talk a little bit about like how much do we take this information at face value. So when I talked to Zach about like what does 0.17 mean, and he was like, it's on a scale of 0 to 1. So essentially it's saying that 17% of people said that their overall satisfaction was geared, or 17% said it was geared towards paid work. And so we asked about like, what does that other 70-80% look like? And he's like, well, there's, you know, it's noise. It could be noise. And then there's other factors that maybe we didn't take into consideration, or other inconsistencies. So he's like, there could be other outside transition resources that we didn't take into account. There's the inclusion of in general education environments. There's the level of support that they need. So there's some things that are not in here that could also be a big factor of what their overall satisfaction of life is. But these, from the survey, from the results, what they've done is that these are the areas: paid work, college experience, internships, all helped with positive overall satisfaction in life, and then nothing in the negative. And then for work satisfaction, again, paid work, internships, unpaid work. Something that they said was a negative was support from a special educator. Yeah. Gloria, I see you shaking your head. I don't know. Oh.
No, I'm just like looking up and down. That's all. No, I'm not shaking.
Education satisfaction, again, support from other teachers, college experience, unpaid work, support from mental health providers, paid work. And all of these so far, you've seen the unpaid work and paid work have been at the top of each of these categories for satisfaction. Negative is learning about succeeding in education and learning about rights. And two, it doesn't mean that those things are not important, I guess, but it just, that's how they rated them as like not helping towards their education satisfaction. And then social life, again, college experience, paid work, unpaid work, volunteering, which makes sense because the more you're out in the community, the more you're going to be able to socialize with the people around you in the community. And then support from family is not seen as a positive, which I think someone said too, like when you're that age working with parents, like you don't want to be around your parents. You don't necessarily see your parents in the most positive light. So that could also be flawed because you don't understand how the parents are supporting you in the work that you do.
I was going to say that, Sherelle. I have my foot in both worlds. I have a 23-year-old with autism and other cognitive disabilities, and I've got an 18-year-old at Berkeley. And they're not a whole lot different. You know, my kid at Berkeley, like he resisted everything I've said to him in the past year. And so I just kind of let it go. And now he's doing them all. But he would have never said in that moment, oh, Mom, yeah, that's a great idea. Like never. He'd be like, why would you even say that?
Right.
And my 23-year-old isn't quite as mean, but you know, he's like, yeah, any opportunity to work and contribute without me and Dad, you know, and lucky we do have an agency that he works with where he can go out and do these things without us. It's just a whole different experience because they're just trying to do their own thing without us telling them what to do, you know?
Yep. So this is just kind of in a graph form. So 89% are experience. The satisfaction is in experience, little bits in supports and learning. Then he does it in kind of a bar graph, what that looks like. So the ratings, paid work, unpaid work, college experience, leadership and advocacy. So again, the green is experience, the yellow is supports, and then the red is learned. So what transition supports were most associated with positive outcomes? Again, this is that schedule. So this is the predictors. So this is in the opposite way. So I think if they were in paid work in high school, they're 4 times more likely to have paid work outside. If they were, outside of high school. In unpaid work, they're almost 2 times more likely. And again, support from the Centers for Independent Living were positive predictors having jobs after high school. And then again, in the negatives, learning about health, support from family, and then learning about making life decisions. Again, what do you do with kind of those areas? Are they really the negative, or just at the time it seems to be negative? So predictors of college
Do
again.
you mind going back one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where it says support from family, does that mean the more support you have from a family, the less likely you are to have a paid job after high school? Is that what it's saying?
I think that they're saying that the support, some of them saying the support was not as helpful. That's what I'm reading.
Was not as important as
Yes.
actually having a job.
Yeah.
Okay.
And two, so for this one too, so this is something that came up in our focus group. So it's support in the opposite way. So we had a couple of youth that were like, our parents said that we're not going to amount to anything, that we're not going to be able to do anything. So so they see that as my family is not supportive. So in that sense, like hearing from them was not at all helpful to me getting, my job satisfaction. So I think we have to look at it in that way too. Like not every parent is going to be, looking at their youth in the most positive and having those higher hopes and expectations for their youth. So I think that plays a factor in that as well. So the predictors of college, again, college experience, internships, learning how to apply for scholarships, leadership and self-advocacy experience, work, learning how to succeed in college and training, volunteer, PETs. So in the negative, they said support from school counselors and support from family. For the counselor one, when we were at this, when we were at the summit, there was a youth there from the youth council at the raised level, so the regional level, and they, one person said, like, for me, when I went to my youth school counselor to say where I wanted to go to school, they're like, you can't do that. That's above you. So they just like, I had to go out and do this on my own because they didn't see that as being something that I could do, that I had the ability to do. So I think that's some of where that negative comes from when they're in the schools and working with them to get into college. So paid job. So again, paid work was the highest, work training experience, support from other teachers that were not special education teachers, learning how to apply for scholarships and student loans, learning how to succeed, leadership, self-advocacy. I know in all 3 of these categories, I know support for family did not make the list. So support for mental, so this is where the mental health provider made it at the bottom, but in the other one, they were at the top of being the most supportive, and then learning about health. Again, 59% said that the experience was the most important outcome for their post-school outcomes. But this was important too, the apply for scholarships and learning how to succeed in college. We're making a comeback there in terms of what they wanted to learn versus the experience piece. In this scale, so I'm going to do so this is kind of all the youth, 73% had paid work after high school, 66% had college, and then 85% had a combination of work and education. And so what this next one does is show the difference between if they had a job in high school and if they didn't. So this top green bar says, yes, I had a paid job in high school, and they were 10% or 20% more likely to get a job after high school than those youth that did not have a paid job in high school. And then again, down here, they were 10% more likely to attend college, if they had a paid job in high school, and then 10% more likely to have a combination of both. But what I thought was interesting, that still, even if they didn't have a job, there, you know, there's 83% of them that were still able to not only find work, but then combine that with education as well. So this statistic gave me a little rub, just because when I went to the Department of Labor statistics, I'm like, how many, you know, youth are actually working, and it's like 19%. So I'm like, how does this percent equivalent to that only 19% of youth with disabilities are actually working versus 63% of their counterparts? So then I'm like, where does this fit in? How does this make sense to what the statistics actually say?
And I wanted to just state a little bit about this, Sherelle, is that I feel like the likelihood of the families that answered these questions and the youth that answered these questions are someone that had access to that magazine, right? Or had access to take this. And so I think I'm making an assumption here, but anyone that's reading those kinds of magazines is already going above and beyond with their young person, right? They already have access to all of this information. And so if we had kind of gone out into the rural communities and those underserved communities and we were asking these same questions, I think these numbers would be way different.
Yeah.
Because I know for Arizona, the number of youth post-secondary education, all that, those numbers are not as wonderful as this shows.
Right.
So, but I think it's still really valuable information.
Absolutely. I think with our focus group, we had 22 youth total, so it was a small group here in Colorado, but I don't think any of them were actually, or maybe one or two of them actually were in jobs currently. The rest of them said they were all looking for jobs. So again, that statistic doesn't match what we've seen in our focus group. So, but I think you're right. Like the people who have access to have a monthly subscription to a magazine and look through it have better access than maybe those in the underserved communities or in the rural communities. So those people were not actually responding to this survey. That's a good point.
I think that parent involvement is really interesting too, just because I do a lot with family engagement and we talk about that in transition. Because there's so much research that you have more successful outcomes with family engagement. And so I don't know how you figure that out, how they interpreted the question or what, but I think
right. And because they were all saying that family was like not helpful.
Yeah. And that's when I'm like, okay, so when I'm talking to families, I'm like, you know, and in my anecdotal experience, the people I know that are doing great things had a lot of family advocacy. At least maybe it's the way that the families are engaged or something.
Yeah, because that was the response in our focus group too. Everyone pretty much in my group, at least that I ran, agreed that family support was one of the biggest, if not the biggest, factor in like their view on their potential in life.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of my kid, right? And she got her job because a neighbor of ours was talking to me and I found out about it. And so she applied. She goes to it because I drive her. Like, so although like she thinks working is like one of the most exciting things and that is preparing her for a future, she probably neglects to see that the parent support.
Yeah.
If I hadn't supported her working, I wouldn't have told her if I hadn't. But I also wonder, an earlier slide talked about the impact of the Independent Living Center, and the ILC is great, but we find locally not that many people utilize it compared to the vast number. So I wonder if this survey over represents the Independent Living Center population, if maybe they were sending it out. And that may skew towards a group of people who had more support, who engaged in that community. I just, we had a survey once and it got posted on listservs among neurodiverse young adults throughout the United States, and it was directed on how well PHP was serving parents. So we got all this like wacky data, and we ended up having to take out all the young adults from everyone outside of our zip code. It dropped our numbers down by like 50%, but it actually answered the research questions we wanted. So So one group of ILCs can really change what we may be hearing, which is the group who succeeds is utilizing the ILC network, you know.
Good points. I think before this, Anne and Quinn and I, we were meeting and talking about kind of different data and how it's being used and how it could easily be skewed. And so I like that you said, like, we took that into account and made the adjustments, even though it cut half of our data points, like we made the move to make sure that we had accurate data. So that's, yeah, commendable, but also how it should be done. This was back to transition activities and satisfaction. So again, paid work, all the experiences are always the most important, and then learning scholarships and how to succeed in college. Yeah, there we go. See independent centers or centers for independent living popping in there. So this is their findings. Few organized high school transition activities. Important high school experiences include employment facilitated by parents, involvement in exclusive school clubs. Meaningful employment is extremely important, but full employment is a challenge. Health and medical barriers are a concern and can make full employment difficult, and social life is an area of growth. From a parent paraprofessional perspective, again, few transition activities in schools. Inclusive high schools experience were important, but incidental and not related to special education. And social life after high school is important. Conclusions, transition activities are not occurring at a high rate. Transition experiences are less common than learning about transition content or having transition supports. A limited number of transition activities are positively associated with positive post-school outcomes. And adult satisfaction ratings and transition experiences, especially paid work, are more strongly associated with post-school satisfaction and positive outcomes than transition content learned or transition supports provided. So, but I think we have a different perspective on that, going through that together a little bit on what that looks like and how that information could be portrayed. So what do we do with this? I mean, is some of this information valid? Do we think experiences is still kind of that top key and very important? And then how do we move forward as parent centers? How do we help bridge that gap between the schools and other collaborative partners around us to make sure that the youth are getting those experiences if we value that as being important?
I mean, I think, first of all, I mean, as much as we try to collect the best and most accurate data, it's always subjective. It just is. But that being said, I do think you guys got a great sample, and I don't know, I mean, all we can do is encourage families to be having these conversations with their kids. You know, what do you want and what don't you want? You know, I mean, it's basic, but not having them will ensure, you know, an outcome also.
Right.
But, you know, and then just talking to my husband about, like, my younger son who's at Berkeley, like his experience and all of his complaining throughout his career as my kid, my husband was really clear, like, he's never had a game that we didn't attend. You know, he has never had a conference that we didn't attend. He's never had anything that either one of us, but usually us both, we attended. So he doesn't even know what it's like to have non-supportive parents. You know, he thinks he does because he didn't like certain things. But I mean, so many of our kids, and they're probably not included in this, I mean, are really coming from no support, you know, and I don't know, like, I know that wasn't helpful. I'm just trying to make sense of it too, you know, to push like along the conversation. But my son that's 23, I mean, he just had the most amazing experience from pre-K on. And that's probably because I'm social. Like, I really valued the people that worked in his life, and I created relationships with all of them, and we still have them. So he's like, he just loved all of school. He hated when it ended, finally, like the last inch of transition finally ended. And now here we are, and it's been a little bit of a struggle, but we're getting really on track now. I mean, our kids want to feel like they're part of something. They want to feel independent. They want to contribute. And yeah, and I think they want to be social, but they're not that much different from us. We all have like our own styles.
Right.
And we just have to keep making opportunities available and kind of catch them when they're ready, when their maturity level or when their confidence level kind of catches up with them and they're like willing to take a swing at something. But that's assuming, like Maria said, that we're taking them to all these things. It's very rare that an agency does. I have one that does, but wow, you know, a lot of times it's mom and dad that are taking them wherever they're going to go.
Right. Right. I have a parent that I'm working with right now, and that conversation was happening. So we're trying to work on their circle of support. And they're like, you know, everyone in my circle right now that I can invite to a meeting is paid. And, you know, how do we, and right now we're going to every single event that she does. And, you know, she's swimming every day, and it's exhausting. It's so exhausting. Like, how do we grow your circle so that you can have unpaid and, you know, supports helping you out. So it's just like, just seeing that, you know, just that heartache on their face. Like, we're trying the best we can to make sure that she's experiencing everything. She has homecoming this weekend, and like, we don't want to go to homecoming. So how do we get
Oh my gosh.
go with
Yeah.
her? So yeah, I absolutely get it. And that, yeah, just hearing that. One of the questions they asked, I don't have it on here, but it was kind of what do they do next? And so what I'm hearing is that this could be, while it's a good sample, it was probably very narrow in who was able to participate. So do we ask them to do more work and make sure they're reaching those unserved communities, maybe people that don't have access to internet and they don't subscribe to that? How do we get them out into the rural areas? Like, this is good information, but is that reflective of really the whole disability community, or did we just find that specific narrow end? So do I ask them to, you know, is that a possibility to look into that kind of work? What do you guys think?
I would like to know that, but I think the experience, because that's kind of what was the biggest piece, right? Is that it seemed like between the youth and the parents, the experience piece was the number one indicator that they would have success. So as a parent center, how does that translate to the work that we do with the parents that we serve, right? Like, obviously it's the messaging that we have to tell the families. This is a really important piece, you know, experience in employment and volunteer and all of these things. And I know that we probably could do a better job of helping the parents and the youth with their VR relationship. I know that we get a lot of calls of that's not always working well, but we also talk to parents about looking outside of all of those state
Right.
services. You know, what does that look like? If it's not going perfectly for you with VR and your transition program in the high school isn't doing all that it should be doing, I mean, there's certainly, you know, follow the chain of command, and these are the things that you can be asking for in your IEP and your transition plan and all that stuff. And it takes forever. Like, I'm in the midst of that right now. Or you can take matters into your own hands and know that these experiences are really important. And like Maria said, you know, keep your ears open. You know, is there a possibility that, you know, someone already in your circle, in your community, is looking for a volunteer or, you know, an internship, or you know, you have a relationship with someone where you could say, hey, my kid would really, you know, would love to kind of learn and be there and help. So I guess I would love to hear what everyone else thinks about how do we do that? How knowing that experience is such an important piece, how do we make something so that we can share that with the parents? Like, how does that look? And every situation is different, obviously. You know, there's the parents that are working 2 or 3 jobs, and they're single parents, and they've got a bunch of kids, and they're not going to be the ones driving their kid and, you know, making the phone calls and the emails and all of that. So how do we help those families too?
And I know that when my son was in transition and I had really great relationships with those teachers, a lot of times it was really heartbreaking for me. It was sad because they, as a school, had a lot of connection with local businesses and stuff. And so our kids were going on to have these awesome experiences, but the teachers knew once school is over, that was done, and like, they were so afraid that maybe like my son would be like thinking that he's going to go work for the post office because he's been there helping, but like, that's not the case. And I told them, I'm like, that's not your worry. Don't worry about that. Parents need to advocate to have these experiences for their kids, right? But that's still something that stops us now. Like, we're in the paid internship program, but it's like pulling teeth. I know it is, to get businesses to bite and say, okay, I will hire your student or your kid for this amount of time or whatever. I mean, you have to make it like so juicy, and it has to make total sense for that even to happen. It's a hard market out there. I feel us on this call, like we're charged with pushing that needle further, but it's like, wow. And I don't feel it's impossible, but I feel like it's definitely, there's a lot that stops us and stops our kids.
Right.
But it doesn't mean it's impossible. I certainly will never give up on trying and being in spaces like this where we're putting our heads together as to how can we support that. But not everyone can, like my husband has his own business now on the weekends where my son works with him too. And that's great, but not everyone can do that.
Right.
But it's not like you can just get your kid on board to wanting to work and then, oh, I'm just going to go work at McDonald's. No, not necessarily. And this is just me. I'm crazy, but I'm having talks with all my local legislators because I'm trying to write legislation to pay educators more money, not like teachers, but educators that assist our kids on the job. Like my son can do work, but he needs a job coach there with him, or somebody that can just kind of be in the background to give that support while he's doing the task. And that's a very tough deal because these people are being paid like 13 to 17, like maybe 19, and it's like a revolving door.
Yep.
And so there's just a lot with the system. And again, I have like a raging migraine right now, and I'm still here because this is what I believe in, but I can't believe that, oh, it's just never going to get any better and that's the end of it. No, we just maybe haven't found the exact equation yet, but it's out there, and it will be answered in a room like this.
Right.
But it's like, well, what exactly? I don't know, but we have to just keep trying and stabbing at talking, having the conversations, what's worked here, what didn't work here, and then how can we bridge that gap?
Yeah.
So general, sorry, but yeah.
Okay, Maria, thanks for coming. Any final last thoughts before you take off?
No, but one thing my staff have said, and I think it's really true, is that we need to, as a historically parent center, that's a blessing and a curse. And our kids don't want to learn from people who look like us, like their parents' friends. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing how people crack this, because it probably needs to fall to, just like we are peer to peer, parent to parent, it probably needs to be youth to youth.
Yeah.
And that's something that we just are not, we don't do. The ILC does, other people do. So we're going to have to learn new muscles on this, and it'll be interesting.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for joining us today.
All right. Take care.
Bye, Maria.
Okay, I want to show one more thing, and this is the kind of some results from our focus group. Let me pull this up real quick. So in August, so our goal here was to do a focus group that included all the centers, all the regions that we served in Region D2. However, it didn't work out that way. So we just did a focus group on our youth in Colorado. So we did two separate focus groups. One was in person, we had 16 youth, and then we did one virtual, which was 7 youth. And so what we want to show is kind of what their responses were, which is a little, it's, some of them are do the exact opposite of what we just learned in the data that I just shared with you. But this is kind of like what they've shared with us, what's important to them, what are some of their fears. And the next page is kind of more of like, what were their frustrations? What are their needs? What do they want? What do they wish they would have known earlier? And so one of the needs that I thought was important to point out was family support, because in that other one, like we said, family support was always at the bottom, but this is one of the needs that we want family support. We're sick of being told that we won't be, be with anything, do anything with our life. We know the resources are there, but we don't know how to access them. One youth said that they're being told how to live in a house and what to do, but no one's actually told her how to buy a house. Like, what do I do? Or how do I know if an apartment is a good apartment? How do I do that search? And so this was just really important for, I think, the work that we're going to do, specifically here in Colorado, to kind of help support what we're hearing from our youth. And so this is something that we'll share out, but I think it's a good start to just kind of understanding what the youth are asking for, what they want. So we have this big survey that we know, but this is more focused. And again, it's a smaller group of youth, but it gives us a direction of what the youth are looking for, what they're asking for. And then how do we grow from here? How do we get more youth involved? Maria is saying a younger generation, and we have Quinna. We have Quinna, a recent graduate, and so those are what we're doing, and making sure that the youth focus group of the youth community that we're creating is also coming to our community practice meetings and sharing their voice. And so we're trying to bring that youth into the work that we're doing. So, yeah. We have about 10 minutes. Any final thoughts? Gloria, I appreciate all that you've shared today. I'm glad that you were here. No, I really appreciate it. I was like, I don't want to be the only one talking. So I'm glad that there were some other voices out there. So
You did great on the presentation. Thank you. Some people, yeah, it's hard to listen to, but you were great. You have thank you.
okay. So you guys, I sent attached kind of the PowerPoint that I just went over, and I'll reattach that in an email so that you guys have that to use, whether you want to share that with your staff at your center to kind of move forward with, or whatever you do with it. And then also this fact sheet, just kind of know what some of the other youth are saying within our community, just kind of help move the work that we do. So you're welcome. Thank you guys for joining today. I appreciate it. I appreciate the thoughts. This was a good session, and I was glad to hear kind of your points of view and perspective. So thank you guys. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
Okay. What do you think?